Hello, today we're going to talk about the 9-mark essay question. Now, the 9-mark essay question is one of the perhaps more challenging questions in the National 5 exam, but that doesn't mean that it is impossible for you to pick up marks. In fact, if you understand the structure of how to answer these questions, it's quite easy to pick up a significant number of marks doing these questions. And if it's a question that you know quite a bit about, then it's actually relatively straightforward to pick up full marks for this. So it's very important that you understand the structure, because answering these questions in the correct structured way is what is going to allow you to gain a significantly high mark for answering these. So the 9-mark essay question asks you to write a short essay about a specific area of the course. It basically asks you to evaluate the importance of a factor compared to other factors. Now, like all essays, your introduction should have your essay should have an introduction. It should have a main body, and in that main body for the 9-mark essay, there should be 5 developed points, and there should be a conclusion supported by a reason. Now, there are 2 9-mark essays in the final exam, and each one is worth 9 marks. That means that overall, the 9-mark essays are worth 18 marks in total in the National 5 exam, and this means that it is the joint top in terms of most marks available, along with the how fully question and the explain question, which are also worth in total 18 marks each. So the structure of the 9-mark essay question is as follows. There is 1 mark available for the introduction, 5 marks for developed points of knowledge that answer the question, 1 mark for balance, which just means that you bring in a relevant factor that isn't in the question, 1 mark for the conclusion, and 1 mark for giving a supporting reason. The introduction is relatively straightforward. You just list the factors that you will be discussing in your essay. So in many ways, the introduction can act like a little plan that can help and guide you so that you know what you're going to write about, and you can look back at it and think, right, I need to write about this next. You need at least 3 different factors, and you must include the isolated factor in the question. The isolated factor in the question is just the answer that they suggest to the question. So for example, to what extent was William Wilberforce the main reason for the abolition of slavery? Now, this question is asking us why was slavery abolished, and the isolated factor it's giving us, the possible answer it's giving us, is William Wilberforce. So it's saying, how far was William Wilberforce responsible for this? So you have to give 2 other factors that led to the abolition of slavery and also mention William Wilberforce. So your introduction would be something like, there were many reasons for the abolition of slavery, including William Wilberforce, which is the isolated factor, the sugar boycott, and the speeches of Thomas Clarkson. Now that you've written that, when you're writing the points of knowledge, you can refer back to that and say, right, I've written about William Wilberforce, what I'm going to write about next, write the sugar boycott. And then so you've written about the sugar boycott, what I'm going to write about next, write Thomas Clarkson. So these can act as a help and a guide for you. With the points of knowledge, you've got to provide relevant facts and show how it answers the question. So you can't just state a fact. You've got to make sure that the fact links directly to the question. So for example, you couldn't say that in Bristol, 50,000 people organised the sugar boycott to stop purchasing slave-produced sugar. That is true. In a sense, it's sort of relevant, but you've not linked it to the question. You'd have to say that the sugar boycott in Bristol helped with the abolition of slavery because it undermined one of the economic reasons for slavery itself. So it's the linking it to the question that's really important here, as well as providing relevant and detailed facts. So you need 5 separate knowledge points that are related to the question, and you must directly link each point of knowledge to the question. Now, I've kept saying that word directly. That's because it's one of the big issues. Candidates often don't relate the points that they're making to the question, and that means that you can't really access the mark. You must also write about 2 different factors, so you must give detailed knowledge points about the factor that's in the question and then at least 1 other factor. And if you've done that, if you start writing about the sugar boycott and provide a relevant and related point to the question, then you get a mark for that, a knowledge mark for that, but you also get a balance mark. So in many ways, you can get this extra little bonus mark for knowing that there is something else that answers the question rather than just the isolated factor. This is an example of a point of knowledge. So the question is, to what extent was William Wilberforce the main reason for the abolition of slavery? The point of knowledge can be William Wilberforce was key to the abolition of slavery, that's linking it to the question, as he brought forward the bill to end the slave trade in Parliament 17 times before it was finally passed. Now that's factually accurate, and it links to the question, therefore it gets a mark. Conclusion. Now the conclusion mark is perhaps one of the easiest marks in the entire exam. I've said before there are some what I call low-hanging fruit marks, marks that are very easily accessible even if you're not really sure about the question. And the conclusion mark for the 9-mark essay is one of those marks, because you can get a conclusion mark without knowing anything. You can get a conclusion mark for just basically reusing the question. So conclusion just means to give a judgment, to sum up, to actually answer the question. So the easiest way to do this is just to use the isolated factor. If you remember, our question is, to what extent was William Wilberforce the main reason for the abolition of slavery? Our conclusion is just going to be William Wilberforce was the main reason for the abolition of slavery. So all you've done is just a little bit, tweaked the question and turned it into an answer, and you get a mark for that. Final mark is available for a supporting reason, or sometimes it's called the evidence mark. So to gain a supporting reason mark, you must just provide a reason for your conclusion. When doing this, just reuse one of the points of knowledge that you included earlier. Many candidates struggle to get this mark because they think, oh, I need to put something new. No, don't put anything new. Just use something that you've mentioned before. So if you're saying William Wilberforce, you've already talked about how he brought forward a bill 17 times. That's fine. Give that as your reason. Just reuse one of the reasons that you had above, and make sure you use the one that you think is most likely to get a mark, because if it's wrong, then you won't get a mark for it. So if you're pretty certain about 2 facts that you've written, but you're absolutely 100% sure about the third one, use the one you're 100% sure of. So, to what extent was William Wilberforce the main reason for the abolition of slavery? Still our question. And our supporting reason. This was because William Wilberforce brought forward the bill to end the slave trade in Parliament 17 times before it was finally passed. As you can see, that is just one of our points of knowledge from above. We have put these things together and we've reused bits, and we've got kind of little extra marks here and there. And so while the 9-mark essay might seem a little bit intimidating, if you break it down, the introduction is actually quite straightforward. There's a balance mark for bringing in an extra factor, so that's a little kind of bonus. The conclusion mark is just reusing the question, and the supporting reason mark is just reusing one of the factors you've mentioned in the main body. It's not actually all that complicated. So here is a model answer to show you exactly what we're talking about. So the question is still, to what extent was William Wilberforce the main reason for the abolition of slavery? So there were many reasons for the abolition of slavery, including William Wilberforce, the sugar boycott, and the speeches of Thomas Clarkson. That's our introduction. First paragraph. William Wilberforce was key to the abolition of slavery as he brought forward the bill to end the slave trade in Parliament 17 times before it was finally passed. That is a mark. William Wilberforce also gave passionate speeches in the House of Commons in favour of abolition, which helped to convince many MPs to vote for abolition. That is our second knowledge mark. The sugar boycott also helped abolish slavery, as many people refused to buy sugar produced by slaves, which meant slavery was less profitable, thus undermining the slave trade. Now we get a knowledge mark for that, because we've related it to the question, sugar boycott also helped abolish slavery. But we also get a balance mark because we've brought in a new factor. So the factor in the question is William Wilberforce, but now we're talking about the sugar boycott, so we've now got 3 knowledge marks and our balance mark. Then it goes on to say, Thomas Clarkson also helped abolish slavery as he made many speeches around the country, which convinced large numbers of the public to support abolition. Thomas Clarkson also collected items used to torture slaves, such as manacles and thumbscrews, and this demonstrated to many people that slavery was evil, which significantly helped the abolitionist cause. So we can see in that paragraph that there are 2 knowledge points. We get 2 knowledge marks, plus our 1 for sugar boycott, plus our 1 for 2 for the William Wilberforce paragraph, giving us 5 overall. Finally, we move on to our conclusion. William Wilberforce was the main reason for the abolition of slavery. Conclusion mark. This was because William Wilberforce brought forward the bill to end the slave trade in Parliament 17 times before it was finally passed. That is our supporting reason, and you can see that's just a repetition of one of the points of knowledge that we used in the question. It may seem like a lot, but all you've really done there is you've brought in 5 bits of knowledge, and by having 5 bits of knowledge, you've got 9 marks. So for remembering 5 facts, you're getting 9 marks. If you only remember 4, you can still get 8. And if you only remember 3 points of knowledge, you can still get 7 out of 9, which is quite a good score. So please, when you're doing these questions, make sure you're using the correct structure, because if you use the correct structure, it is much more likely you will get marks, and you will find it a lot easier to write them when it comes to producing them in the exam.